My name is Liliana Simwe. I am the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Advisor here at Brampton Library. Today, I have the honor of having a conversation with my colleagues, our CEO, Todd Kyle, and the Director for Community Engagement and Partnerships, Cyrilla Utangi, to have a conversation about what that means. So we have acronyms for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, including ADI or IDEA, which is what we use at Brampton Library. So you might hear me say IDEA a few times. You may hear them say the same. It just means diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and equity. So to start off, I will invite them to introduce themselves and let us know the kind of work that they do and how long they have been with the library.
So my name is Todd Kyle. I am the CEO of Brampton Library. I've actually only been here for a little over a year and a half. Prior to that, I was the CEO of Newmarket Library. And my role here is obviously responsibility for the whole organization, but in particular, it's responsibility for strategy, for setting the tone, and for community relations. And so that's one of the reasons why I have a very strong role to play in the IDEA project.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, and my name is Cyrilla Utangi, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships. As you've said before, I have been with Brampton Library for over 30 years, and I've held various positions in this library as a librarian, as coordinator of multicultural services, and manager of diversity and adult services. Now, as a director, I lead a team of managers of programs and outreach, collections, marketing, and communications, as well as a volunteer supervisor.
Excellent. Thank you. So that is really great to know. Todd and I are actually newer to the team. I joined the team about a year ago, but Cyrilla has been here for quite some time, 30 years. That's incredible. So I'm excited to talk to you about what that means for your work and idea, how this has evolved, and to just learn so much about you and the library in general. So I'm sure our audience now has an idea of what you do, and they're curious to know how this relates to diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility in general. So before I dip into that, however, I just wanted to see if you could share with us maybe a brief background on how you first became aware of some cultural differences. We live in Brampton, we work in Brampton, where it's very multicultural. And so if you could just give us a background of when you first interacted with various cultures and how that has evolved in your life.
So I was actually born and grew up in Canada. Sounds kind of boring. And I'm descended from immigrants, settlers from France and from Ireland. And like I said, I've lived here all my life. My early exposure growing up actually in Mississauga to other cultures tended to be centered around the fact that I attended Catholic school and Catholic church. And so there were immigrants from southern India, from Goa, from Italy, from Malta, from the Philippines. And it was actually when I started working in the libraries as a teenager that I had really my first exposure to a much wider cultural diversity. So I remember things like working at one of the branches where there was a large community of young Tamil refugees. I remember working with colleagues who were from Ethiopia and Guyana, introducing us to their cuisine. I actually specifically remember some colleagues trying to trick me into eating a really hot chili pepper at an Indian buffet. And I knew it was going to set my mouth on fire, but I was a good sport. And I did eat it. And even as the community was changing, things like my neighbors and I had a sort of an impromptu dance recital with our daughters. My daughter did Scottish dance and their daughter did Hindu dance. And it was just a totally impromptu thing. It was really wonderful. I think though that probably food is the biggest criteria, the biggest catalyst here.
Yeah. Amazing.
For me, I was born and brought up in India and was exposed to a wide range of religions, languages, culture, traditions, values, and beliefs. After my marriage, my husband and I, with our little baby, migrated to Singapore, where I was introduced to newer cuisines, newer religions, and languages.
Yeah.
After accumulating all of this, we then arrived after 3 years to Canada, Brampton. Brampton was then totally a homogeneous society. It was not as vibrant and culturally diverse as it is today. And for the very first time, when we were walking on the streets of Brampton, I became aware of what racism is when people shouted at us and said, "Go home." At that time, not knowing the word racism, I simply thought that it was, they didn't know world geography, and so we need to educate people.
Thank you so much for taking us on your personal journeys and sharing your stories. That is really informative in terms of just getting to know you and how you have come along in terms of interacting with other cultures. And thank you, Sorella, for sharing that deeply personal incident about racism. I'm comforted by the fact, by your response, the way you said they did know geography, they needed to learn more. That is so true. It's usually when we don't know better that we understand the other cultures the least. And so that is also why at Brampton Library we're committed to educating and raising awareness, and all the idea initiatives really focus on that element in a really big way, and training and sharing information, part of our mandate of course, but also going deeper into educating ourselves and our staff, and that is really good. So I just want to then, now that we talked about training, to talk about some of the trainings that we have had. I know I saw some of the culture sensitivity and bias training that we have all had, and I wanted to know if you could share your experiences and the impact that training might have had on you individually, and just anything that you learned.
Sure. So I think you started off, Lillian, by talking about how the sensitivity to hearing from other people, being exposed to other people, and hearing different ideas is really, really important. So that was something that I think I've always felt. I've always felt that diversity comes in many forms. It's essential for us to thrive as a human race and as a society. But I think what the training helped me do was sort of put into words some of the things that I was aware of, but maybe didn't really quite know how to articulate, and learn that one of the things that we're supposed to be aiming for is to make sure that people's needs are met, and to be aware, of course, of the biases that we may have that may be unconscious. And one of the things that I learned, and again, I knew this but maybe didn't know how to articulate it, was that one of the ways to overcome those biases is to increase the diversity of the people that we connect with and to learn more about them, which is obviously something that within this community, within this workplace, this organization, we have the opportunity to do. So I think there's also a piece in there, because we're a library, that we also have to talk about where we get our information from. And so diversifying those information sources is very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is so informative. Just before I get to Israel, I wanted to make a quick comment in regards to what you just said about diversifying our information. Brampton in general as a community is very diverse, and we have really been seeking ways and looking for opportunities to serve the community as a whole, to make sure that we're inclusive in everything that we do, whether it's in our suppliers and in literature, what we have on our shelves, but also in our staff, right? We have been very intentional in changing our policies and really inviting everyone from the community to feel at home within the library space. So it's a huge component, and I'm glad that this training is amplifying that direction and that mandate that has been fully articulated in our strategic plan and the idea strategy. So thank you so much. It's good to know that we are all in the right direction. Over to you.
Okay, for me, Lillian, I the training brought to me that we all have unconscious biases, and an example comes to my mind. Difference between the Western culture and the South Asian cultures. For example, parents in the Western Canadian culture tend to live all by themselves after the kids have grown up and moved out. Whereas this is strictly different from the South Asian community, where children, especially boys, tend to continue to live with their parents even after marriage. And this is not just normal, but this is expected of the community, this is expected of children. Also, I was reminded, having lived in Brampton for over 40 years,
Yeah.
I'm reminded of how things used to be about 20 years ago in the cultural differences, right? So, a business in Brampton, not aware of the cultural norms and things like that, um, wanted to hire mentors for kids. So they went ahead and found a real good East Indian teacher in his 30s, but later found out that he was still living with his parents, and that was a red flag. They did not recruit him. So I think we need to educate and understand that there are different ways of living, different ways. One way is not better than the other. Each one has its merits and drawbacks, and we need to make that call.
Thank you. So let me touch a little bit about recruitment, because that is a really great example. One of the things that is very obvious in the equity seeking on equity deserving groups is that we see that the recruitment and the outcomes are very different. The experiences in the workplace and generally the way they show up is very different, and that can look like red flags, like you just said, because it's different. To some people it's even strange because they've never seen it, and that's why training and education comes a really, really long way. I'm thinking about some of the changes that we have made to our recruitment policies and how we continually learn that, for example, in certain cultures, children, even adults, tend to stay at home much, much longer. And that can also mean that they're caregiving, even though they do not have children of their own. So in terms of a benefit package, for example, in terms of accommodation, we're looking at what are the possibilities? How can we make it more attractive to the talent from the diverse communities, from the different multicultural groups to join while showing up as they are, with everything that they are, with their cultures, with how their dress code, everything. And that is really something that we are committed to continually looking into and continually improving. And so I'm glad that you're catching some of those things during training. It means we're hitting the right spots. Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you so much again for sharing that. Now I want to dive into your individual roles in IDEA. I'm sure our audience want to hear how all this, whether it's the training or whether it's your personal experience, leads into how you read and the kind of work that you do. Could you just tell us briefly how your personal experiences and your training so far has impacted the way you read and the work that you do in general?
Sure. So, I think it's really important for me, especially as the Canadian-born person, that I don't lead off by assuming that I know what people in the organization, what people in the community want. So it's really important that I take the role to listen and to continuously learn. I don't necessarily have the experiences that would teach me that, so listening to people who do have those experiences is really important. In terms of my role in the whole idea project, I could say that overall I'm sort of like the champion. My role is to sort of model the behavior and to encourage the kind of behavior that we're looking for, and to, as I said, to listen to the community. So a couple of examples of that, and certainly we've learned a lot about it through our training, has been the establishment of employee resource groups. And so part of my role is really to step back, make sure they have what they need, and of course listen to what they have to say, but to take a bit of a step back. Another piece that I've done is to ensure that as a workplace, but then also as a community serving organization, that I sort of personally acknowledge some of the very important either social justice related or cultural related observances on the calendar, holidays and other special days. And as well as some people probably already know, I've even made an effort to learn one of the languages that is in our community. And again, that's a way of expressing the importance and modeling some behavior.
Just to clarify for some of the people in the audience that may not understand what a champion means. So a champion is an individual who is not necessarily part of a specific group or identifies as a member of that group, but supports and basically helps that group to achieve equity and any other goals really that would advance that group. So at Brampton Library, we have champions who work with equity deserving groups in their ERGs or even on the Idea Council to articulate and support the causes that people in those specific groups are pursuing, basically. So whether, let's say, for example, we have two employee resource groups, one for persons with disabilities, the other one for racialized people. And what that means is that we have some people who do not belong to those groups, who do not have lived experiences, but they are committed to advancing the causes of those groups. And that's what a champion means, or an ally. So I just wanted to clarify for everyone in the audience. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Okay. For me, I will give you an example of what I personally experienced after coming to Canada. After a few years after settling down, reality hit me actually when I went job hunting. And then I realized that all employers were asking for 1 day Canadian experience. And so I thought, where could we buy this 1 day Canadian experience? So then I started thinking, new immigrants get really confused about this because the same qualifications and education that gave them an entry to Canada, the minute they land in Canada, has no significant value. So they are caught in a catch-22 situation. They cannot get a job without experience, and they cannot get experience without a job. Even at Brampton Library, then in those years, I applied here and they asked me for 1 day Canadian experience, which I didn't have. Luckily for me, through some influence, I got a librarian's job at Nortel, which was then called Northern Telecoms. And then later on, it was easy peasy. I got hired at the school board. I was hired I worked with the Ministry of Escarpment and then later on I moved to Brampton. As a result of this personal experience, I concentrated my focus towards helping newcomers by developing more diverse programs, collections, services to design and help newcomers to integrate into the Canadian society more easily and quickly. I've also partnered with all different types of organizations as well as equity deserving groups that serve the equity deserving groups, and especially the Moyo Clinic. Now, I also uh, contribute towards the success of the IDEA strategy by implementing the IDEA calendar and also implementing more diverse programs, collections, communications, as well as policies.
Thank you both for sharing how this work um, is going, and I'm confident that we are on the right track, and we'll be able to make a lot of progress in the near future. I just wanted to go back actually to something that you said, Todd, in terms of supporting idea and particularly your cheese and being a champion and how important that is, right? So we know that any initiative cannot succeed without the leadership being supportive of that particular initiative. And we have had the opportunity to have you join, whether it's ERGs or the Idea Steering Committee or the Council, and that is very very impressive, for lack of a better word, because leading by example and having the leadership model that behavior is really what any idea initiative needs. And beyond that, also the other directors, Cirella, or even the others, and the managers as well, coming on board and supporting all these initiatives has been so amazing to watch. For a person in this position, it's really great to identify with such an organization that is doing and walking the walk, not just saying things that will probably not happen, but we see progress and changes, incremental changes. They may not come all at once, but we see a lot happening, and it's because the leadership is engaged and is committed. Um, Back to partnerships as well, in the community, it's amazing looking at the partnerships that we have had over time and how we have really engaged with some of the organizations serving communities at the grassroots at the grassroots level, and how that really impacts our work in general. We learn so much from them. They're in the community every time. They understand the needs that we may not understand, but it also allows us to invite them into our space and to say we are working together to serve one community. We have one goal to ensure that the entire community is progressing. And when we designed the calendar of observances, I remember the goal has always been to say, let's bring more people at this table, people that were not traditionally there. And that's really what inclusion is about. Bringing different groups, equity dissolving groups, celebrating them as much as we celebrate the others, acknowledging them as much as we acknowledge the others. And that really impacts the way our communities feel. And even in internally, our staff, because we really focus on ensuring that it's a place of belonging. It has always been part of our goal to just have a community, have a space that feels welcoming. And I want to jump into the next question, if you don't mind. It will probably be our last question. Um, what can all of us do to learn and to impact our communities um, in terms of in terms of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility? What do you think we can all do?
Well, I think we've been talking about it throughout this conversation about how it's really important to experience and learn about other cultures, other viewpoints, other than our own. In terms of the way the library positions itself in the community is it's really important that we are a place in which the community discovers itself. And so this is one of the reasons why we've worked in partnership, as Sorella has already mentioned, with a number of organizations that are closer to the community and that can help us help us serve people better. I'm particularly proud of our cooperation with the Library Settlement Partnership, which helps us provide both settlement services and English as a second language services within our libraries in a way that on our own we could not necessarily do so well. And I think the other thing is in listening to the community and listening to people's needs, we've been able to change even some of the traditional offerings of a library. So, for example, we know that our community has a particular need to improve their education, and so we've tried to provide textbooks through what we call learning loans in a way that many public libraries have not, and the online homework help and job search help that we provide through Great Infuse as a different product is something that has only come about as a result of us listening to the community and being in partnership with organizations that can tell us, what the community is looking for. So I think it really is important that we keep that open mind and keep listening.
Yeah. I agree with you. I do agree with you on everything you just said. Listening to the needs of the community, and they are continually changing. Change is a factor of life, and we embrace it. So the fact that it's going to continue changing, and we'll continue to listen and continue to improve is a really good way to look at it. Learning from those organizations, but also individual learning has been so helpful for me. As I joined Brampton Library and the community in general, I had to take time to really read about the community, to read about the needs, to be able to set goals and solutions that address those needs and those gaps. So I agree. What about Cyrilla? What do you think we could do?
For me, I believe in planning programs and services, collections and communications to be culturally and linguistically sensitive so that we would meet the needs of the community, Brampton community, which is vastly diverse, and they may be either Canadian born or new immigrants. So we need to serve them. And we have been productive, we have been relevant in offering programs and services as well as collections to meet the needs of the community. But we know we can do more and to meet those needs. And even though we have worked hard to make our library welcoming as well as accessible for everyone, we know that we have members in the community who still have difficulty using the services of the library. And sometimes they also feel they're unsure if they are really welcome. Therefore, we need to ensure that we are continuously educating ourselves on this idea which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility.
Absolutely. I like that you just highlighted the fact that there are still communities or members of the community that may not feel welcome because traditionally they were probably not included or their experiences have been different. And so it's really important that we raise awareness about the fact that we are here to serve them and to also look into their needs. I just want to touch on something that you actually did recently that was so touching for me, particularly because I came to Canada as an immigrant with a single mother with 4 children, and I come from. She's an educator, so she believed I needed to go to school, I needed to have good grades, I didn't need to work. But her being the only one working one income household with 4 children, and having to do everything by herself was so challenging that sometimes we couldn't have enough laptops to do our homework. You had to line up. You had to schedule yourself in to get your homework done. And you did something that was so touching when you decided to loan out laptops to some of the kids in need. It was such a touching thing, and it really brought some emotions back from my experience. And that is one of the greatest ways I think that we're having an impact in the community by serving those specific needs that are not traditionally addressed by libraries, right? And knowing what COVID did, right? You could go into the branch and use a computer, but you still needed to go to school. And so there were, whether it's access to the internet, whether it was just access to a laptop, for someone in school who is living in a low income household, that is a big thing. And that can create, a really huge gap between the next child who has access to everything and the one who doesn't. And that can determine the outcomes of a lot of things in their lives, whether it's their grades, whether it's the universities they're going to go to. And we all know that education really matters. It may not have looked that way, but promoting access is something that we're really doing in the community, and recognizing those small numbers, maybe just those small gaps that were traditionally not recognized. So yeah, thank you for that. It was so touching for me. So before we conclude, maybe I just wanted to give you the opportunity to add anything that you might have wanted to say earlier, or maybe you just wanted to share with our audience in terms of our commitment to IDEA and where you see us going in the future.
We are obviously just beginning our journey, right? And it is we know that this is an ongoing, multi-year or permanent project that we need to do. And again, as Sorella has said before, we've made a lot of progress, but there's obviously a lot more that we can do, and a lot more that we can learn. And we have a number of things that are still coming to fruition. That we're really looking forward to, and so it is a long-term commitment for us.
And I believe that if the community has not felt that the library has met their needs, we would like to hear from the community as well as to what they think we should be doing further to increase their knowledge, to give information, and to make library actually a gathering place for everyone to be able to come here, enjoy as well as study and be successful.
Amazing, thank you. I agree. Community feedback is really key, and we do everything that we can to ensure that we are listening. We do have a way to receive feedback on our website, and we encourage everyone, if you think there's something we can do better, please do not hesitate if you're in the community. And we do have a mechanism for our staff to use as well to give us feedback. I'm in this position for that purpose, and I'm always listening. And anything really that we can improve to have better outcomes for everyone, we will make sure to do that. And so, we can benefit from continuous learning, and I think our idea strategy, which is also on our website, speaks to that because we have designed and committed ourselves to three goals that we really want to achieve, and one of them is that we want to be a community champion. We want to support the community as much as we can in every possible way, and to really engage with the community in a way that allows some of the gaps of inequality to be addressed whenever we can. And the other thing, the other goal is that we have committed to being a welcoming and environment, and just nurturing a safe space for everyone, welcoming place, and inclusive space for everyone, whether it's people within the community coming into our space, or even our staff really. We want to ensure that everyone is having a great outcome, not just what we're doing in terms of the input, but we are committed to the outcomes. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on is just infusing accountability in our work, right? Holding ourselves accountable, even when we don't get it right, saying we are learning, we're going to do it again, and we'll keep doing the right thing until we see some progress, until we see some changes. And sometimes also when we can't do it on our own, inviting experts to come in and help us. I think we have done that successfully. We have been working with CCDI, and we committed ourselves to saying, look, we're willing to learn and we will do everything that we can. And whenever we can't, we will invite CCDI to work with us, and we see the fruit of that. We have seen a lot of changes in a positive direction. So I'm very positive that we're going to see more changes happening, but also more progress and more positive outcomes moving forward. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was such a, how do I describe it? It's so affirming for me, and it gives me this hope and this confidence that we are on the right track, especially coming from the leadership and looking at some of the ways that you're supporting IDEA. I'm sure that we will get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.